very excited to welcome our friend Noah Schwartz, who is the Assistant Professor of Political Science over at the University of the Fraser Valley. Welcome, Noah.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here and be able to chat more about the book.
Well, I'm very excited to talk about the book because it's extremely relevant to our community, as you well know. But I guess we'll start off by just tell us about the book. What's it about?
Yeah, I mean, the book came out of things that I was seeing when it comes to how we talk about guns in the gun community in Canada. So I've studied, gun policy for over 5 years, 6 years now. And what I saw in the public conversation when people would talk about guns in Canada, they would kind of be thinking about it in terms of the United States. I mean, so much about the U.S. frames our conversation on gun policy in Canada. But when I looked on the ground and when I spoke to people in the community, that's not what I was seeing. That narrative didn't reflect the reality on the ground. And so the book was sort of an attempt to correct that, because very, very little has been written about, first of all, gun policy in Canada, but certainly the community of gun owners. They're usually kind of absent from those conversations on gun policy. And I kind of wanted to correct that absence in the conversation and understand why people in Canada own guns and why they're so passionate and dedicated to fight to keep them.
Well, it's an important question, and there's a good and sufficient reason for all of those things. We'll talk about that in a little bit, but I just did want to mention, so this was a book primarily written as an academic work.
Yes. Yeah.
And so, but still obviously great for gun owners, especially if they want to understand the kind of the evidentiary aspect of the gun debate in Canada.
Yeah, no, I think it is primarily, an academic book. However, it really tries to tell the stories of people in the gun community. I spoke to over 100 people, 100 interviews for the book, and people were very generous in sharing their stories with me. And I wanted to, be able to share those stories with as many people as possible, because I think it really tells that story of what guns mean to people in Canada. Once again, to those outside of the gun debate, they might see guns in the news or in the media, right? And as we know, those, they're portraying one very small part of gun ownership. If we think about crime, for example, that's, 0.0001% of guns are going to end up being used in crime, but the other 99.9% are being used for totally normal social uses. Things like hunting, like sport shooting, collecting, reenactment, folks like that. So I wanted to tell the story of the 99.9%, because I think it helps to explain, too, a lot of why people are so motivated and willing to give so much of their time and their money to have representation on Parliament Hill.
Yeah, well, you're definitely right that the other side just doesn't get the airtime, and and that's intentional. The media in Canada intentionally give a lot of coverage and a lot of agreement, even just that kind of implied agreement in interviews and whatnot, to one side of this debate, and almost none to the other. And I'm not complaining too much. I mean, the CCFR gets probably the most media coverage of any gun group ever, but in comparison, it's probably, 5% of what the anti-gun side gets. And so telling our side of the story, I think, is really important. I also want to mention that your book was peer-reviewed, correct?
Yes, yeah. So it went through the academic peer review process. It was read over by editors and other scholars, so you can be certain that the information in it has been double-checked.
Mm-hmm. And that's important, right? So that hopefully academics take the time, if they're involved or even curious about the gun debate at all. And certainly media should have a look at it. Politicians should have a look at it, I think, too. Although politicians are typically busy, but they should look at it, because going back to one of your original points is the lack of understanding of not only the reasons that people own guns, but just the value that people see in it. The value, I don't think anyone really understands it from outside the community, how important guns are to the people that own them, for a variety of different reasons. It's an incredibly unique tool, unlike anything else. And guns aren't golf clubs. It's not just a hobby. So I think that once you understand that, and then you look at the other side, sorry for going on, but this is an interesting point that I see all the time. when you go to the other side, it's very easy to just sweep aside. There's no good reason to own a gun. It's just too dangerous. Well, if you don't understand what guns mean to the people that own them, then you're very ill-equipped to even engage in that debate. Because if you think that their guns are just used for violence, then it's, no problem. Let's spend billions and all this social capital, victimizing all of these gun owners. And it's created a huge mess, right? So it's good that maybe there's an opportunity for people to see the other side of it.
Definitely. And listen, I understand where that comes from. I grew up in a city. I didn't grow up around anyone who owned guns. For the majority of my life, I probably would have fallen into that camp, right? Of all I knew about guns was from the news, and it was scary. But when I started doing research on this and talking to people in the community, I saw that this really isn't what I had been led to believe that it was. And that's been a sort of an impetus for my research, is once again telling those stories that they don't meet the criteria for newsworthiness, right? If it bleeds, it leads. But they are the stories that tell the reality of what gun ownership is in Canada and the people that own guns, who for the most part, everybody I talked to was a kind of a normal person, right? And guns were the key to participating in a part of their life that was very valuable. Whether that is, people who own guns to hunt, and they go to the hunt camp, every fall with their family. And that's a family activity. They're camping out, they're talking, some of the folks go off and hunt and bring back meat, and they share that with the group. Whether it's people who are involved in organized sport shooting competitions, not just the people who sit there and put holes in targets on a bench, but the 𝐥𝐿𝐼𝐶 shooters who are moving around and running and going from stage to stage, or the cowboy action shooters who like to dress up in cowboy regalia. All of these people are united because they use the same tool. And that tool just unlocks so much in terms of the things they're able to do and the communities that they're able to be a part of. And so they're willing to fight for it when it becomes threatened.
Well, so much so that it takes people that have all kinds of different social opinions and turns them into single issue voters. Yeah. That's how important firearms are.
That's for sure. A lot of the people I spoke to in the book came from all different walks of political life, right? These aren't, these aren't people that we would typically associate with, or people would stereotype gun owners as, I would say. These are like some people from big cities who are in progressive circles, but when guns come up, they don't agree with what everybody else is saying. And that can really have an impact on someone. A lot of them said they feel really ostracized from their social circle because they own guns or they're afraid to tell people. And so I think bringing out more of, once again, the normative uses of guns, I think is an important piece of data in the story. And also the story of, what people in Canada go through to get a gun. I think most Canadians are kind of vaguely aware that Canada has gun control, and, they say that the US doesn't. Obviously, it's much more complicated than that. But I'm sure I don't have to tell you or a lot of your listeners that people sacrifice a lot of their privacy, of their time. One of the things I tell people, if you get a gun license and you've been through a recent breakup in the past 2 years, you have to tell the RCMP that, and that shocks a lot of people because they can't imagine talking about their breakup with law enforcement, right? Usually, if you're not doing anything wrong, that's not something that's going to happen to you. So, yeah, I think a lot of people don't understand how regulated the Canadian community of gun owners is, and the sacrifices that people make to be part of that community and to enjoy those pursuits.
Well, it is an important point, because if you just grabbed someone off the street and asked them whether or not that they think we should loosen restrictions on handguns, right, they would instinctually be like, absolutely not. Yeah. And then if you ask them, I use this a lot of times, right? But if you ask them like, well, what are the current restrictions on handguns? They wouldn't know. Yeah. So they don't know what the current restrictions are, or the licensing process, or who owns these guns, or why, or any of this stuff. Yeah. They just know that they need, that there should be bans and there should be more gun control. So it's completely illogical. So it's great that that you've collated a lot of this information in a place where people can find it. Whether or not people that are inherently anti-gun will read it or not, that's one thing. That's a separate thing. But certainly, I think that because we spoke about a lot of the contents, it's probably an important book for anyone in our community to read, because you're having these conversations on an individual level where you can help educate people at some level. Be like, okay, well, you shouldn't jump on board with this because you're being fed a lot of misinformation. So it's really important that you know how to debate that kind of stuff. One of the things you mentioned that you touched on in the book was whether or not the Canadian Canadian gun lobby is like the NRA. Did you want to kind of chat about that a little bit?
Yeah, so I think once again, this is part of people take their understanding of the American gun debate and they copy it and paste it into Canada. And I think, we see this happen in the media a lot. I think the most generous explanation is that people in the media are very, very busy. They've cut a lot of positions in the media. A lot of local newspapers have been cut in the past 20, 30 years. And so you have people that are overwhelmed. They're asked to cover a lot of stories. So what do they understand about gun stuff? Well, it's what they've seen in the US. So that's the lens that they're going to approach it through. The reality is, though, that, the image of the gun debate that people have, I think, in the US is this like David and Goliath story. And so they say like, oh, well, the Canadian gun lobby, that must be Goliath also. And that's one of the things I talk about in my book is like, who are the people that are lobbying for guns in Canada? It's not people who are making money from the gun companies because they're not big enough Canada's not a big enough market for them to care, right? It's people, ordinary people donating a couple $100 that they have left over at the end of the month because they really care about this stuff. So yeah, I wanted to tell that story too. And I was really appreciative that you and Tracy and some folks were willing to share your story with me. And I was able to tell that because I think, it's in the public interest and certainly interesting from a scholarly perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. So is the Canadian gun lobby like the NRA? The answer is no.
I think spoiler alert, we want people to read the book though. So.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. Well, it could be or it might not be.
There we go. Read to find out.
I'll backtrack on that. So I think overall, really a really welcome piece of academic work. Have you had any feedback from anyone else that's read an advanced copy?
Yeah, I've got some feedback from folks in the U.S., some of the scholars there. There tends to be just a bigger community of people studying guns in the U.S., and I think they've appreciated that the book covers this topic in a way that we don't always hear it talked about. So,
was anyone surprised at how different it is in Canada as opposed to what they might have thought before?
Certainly, yeah. No, I go to a lot of conferences in the U.S. For people that study guns, and anytime I talk about it there, it's really night and day in terms of just what I think one of the interesting data points from the book. So part of it also was a survey that I did of gun owners in Canada, and I think a lot of people would be surprised to hear that people in Canada have grown pretty accustomed to some of the laws that in the U.S. would be completely out of the question politically. Things like safe storage laws. A lot of the gun owners I spoke to were like, yeah, of course I'm going to store my gun properly. I don't want my kids in my house to get to it. So that was pretty uncontroversial for them. Whereas in the U.S., that in some states, that's just a non-starter.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's very interesting, and I can't wait till the book starts to circulate around and people kind of tease out more interesting points to share, and it's definitely a welcome addition to the conversation in Canada around guns. That's for sure, because there's so much material on the other side, obviously, right? And never are there academic works telling the other side of the story, at least in any level of detail, like it seems that you've done.
Yeah, well, thank you. And I think when at the end I have moderate policy recommendations at the end that come from this, right? That's what you want to do in your conclusion. Talk about why is this important? What are the implications? And I think one of the implications of this is that I really feel like the government is missing an opportunity to work with this group of people who are passionate about their hobby, but are passionate about public safety. Like everyone I spoke to wants to live in a safe Canada where guns aren't circulating on the streets. The problem is really these guns coming up from the U.S. through smuggling. And the problem is, also a lack of investment in the communities that are suffering the most from gun violence. So I think the moral of the story from my perspective really is that if the government was able to find a way to consult and work with the gun community, I think we could come up with better public policies. And the proof of that, which I talk in the book, is the North American model of wildlife management, where in the 60s and 70s, There were a lot of hunting accidents. The government got together with hunting groups and said, how can we stop this? They created the modern hunter safety course, which was created by these hunting groups. And we significantly reduced hunting accidents without infringing on people's access to the outdoors and to hunting. So everybody wins from this. And I think if we found ways to do that with this community of gun owners in Canada, we could have better public policy. The problem is it makes for bad politics. And so how do you overcome those political incentives to kind of create an issue here for party fundraising?
Well, that's been the trick all along, right? It's yeah. And I mean, God forbid that the government reach out to people, the experts, right? So they'll take emergency room physicians and bring them in to consult on gun control, which is a regulatory topic, right? Not a medical topic. Yeah. So it just, I'm sure that gun owners would be more than happy to see the government rely on experts and people that understand not just the regulatory regime around firearms, but the cultural significance and the motivations of gun owners. And I will also agree with you. Certainly at the CCFR, we are hyper focused on gun safety because we have no choice. We're blamed for the actions of criminals. Yeah. So anything that we can do to increase gun safety or make reduce firearm-related violence, or even suggesting policy or whatever we do, because we're tired of being blamed for that, right? So that definitely is something we focused on by necessity, not just by moral.
I appreciate you platform people like Marcel Wilson, who are doing the hard work of going into communities that are suffering from gun violence, and trying to pull people out of that lifestyle. For the project that I'm working on right now, I've been talking to people who are involved in these violence interruption programs, community policing programs. These are the public policies that actually work to stop violence. It's about supply and demand. We live next to a country where there are more guns than people. The people who want to use guns to do harm are going to find a way to get them. It's supply and demand. If we can reduce the demand for illegal guns, we can fight the problem. And there are a lot of people with a very, very small budget trying to work miracles here while we're putting money into programs that aren't going to improve public safety. So we really need to put that money into going into those communities, helping out these people who are suffering, and finding a way to bring them back and be able to have a normal life like you or I.
Yeah, well, you bring up a valid point, which is attacking the demand side of firearm-related violence. Yeah. Because we live in an age where I can buy a consumer-level drone, throw 10 handguns on the thing, and fly it across the border. Yeah. And even if, just not to go too far down the rabbit hole, but even if you, cut the smuggling of handguns in half, you still have to confront the reality that anyone can buy a CNC machine. Right? A milling machine. Yeah. And you can make real guns, durable real guns, either from 3D printed lowers and then source, actual real steel parts, or you can actually manufacture the steel parts and make disposable guns. And you can do it for not a lot of money. So it's certainly I see the disconnect from reality with lawmakers. Yeah. And of course the people in the media, right? They're just like, well, we can do all these things at the same time. It's like, no. You're putting 98% of your effort against licensed gun owners who are incredibly unlikely to commit any kind of crimes, much less firearm-related violence, and then 2% of the real problem because it's political. Yeah. So it's attacking the demand side is how you reduce firearm-related violence, because criminals, they have money to spend. Yeah. They have what drug cartel doesn't have $150,000 to buy a milling machine and another $100,000 to pay a machinist for 6 months work at night to, punch out, 250 handguns. Anyway. But yeah, that's a great point. I'm glad you brought it up.
And they're durable goods. I've been talking to police officers and they say, one gun will show up at a crime scene in Montreal, Winnipeg, and Calgary, right? Guns can move. They're durable goods. So, even one gun smuggled can be used to commit several crimes. Or like you said, 3D printing. There are officers saying that Canada is becoming one of the big 3D printing hotspots for firearms. Once again, because we've ignored that demand side of the equation, and we've not put the resources. Even when the government does announce funding for violence interruption programs, it's a one-time grant. So these folks are caught up in what they call the funding Olympics, where they're trying desperately to get the funding that they need to keep going, but half their efforts have to be put into finding more funding rather than doing the work. So we need sustained funding. We need permanent sustained funding for these groups if we're going to make a dent in the violence that's happening.
There's a win-win there if everyone just throws down the politics, grows a conscience, and some kind of moral backbone, and just says, just acknowledge, here are the problems. Who are the people not doing anything? We need to fix the problem. And what a refreshing thing that would be to come to occur in Canada.
Yeah, I'm hopeful. I think the conversation's starting to shift. Recent statements that the government acknowledged that gun smuggling is a problem, which is something that I think that the past government was really reticent to do. So I think the boulder is starting to move up the hill, but we'll see how far we can push it.
Yeah, to some degree. Well, the government's confronting a lot of problems, financial issues, all kinds of things. So maybe they're going to get a little bit more pragmatic and honest in their policy formulation. Either way, the book is available on August 26th. So where can people find it?
Yeah, they can get it on Indigo, Amazon, or direct from the publisher, University of Toronto Press. Just Google Noah Schwartz Targeted, and it should come up.
So again, Targeted, Citizenship, Advocacy, and Gun Control in Canada. Really appreciate you coming in, Noah. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It was a great conversation.